The Sales Proformance Show, your source of inspiration in the world of sales and business development. Here we blend cutting-edge sales strategies with personal development, helping you achieve not just professional success, but also personal fulfillment. You'll hear from the experts to help unlock your true potential. And now here's your host, David Sliman.
Welcome to the Sales Proformance Podcast Show. I am your host, Dave Sliman. I'm super excited today. As you know, this show is built around business and professional development, personal growth, and I'm huge on company culture, organizational alignment, and there's so many moving parts when it comes to developing a great culture. And today I have a guest that, like myself, has been a CEO in charge, and it also worked on the front lines with people who are leading the charge. And if you're an executive or a business owner or a CEO, and you want to dive into some business strategy approaches to really increase your game, this is going to be the podcast for you. We're also going to give some insight on how to really generate good hires. And maybe you're a professional who's looking to change your career. You're going to want to listen to this. And listen, my guest today has built high performance sales teams. He has great business strategies. We've had conversations around this. He knows how to make decisions. That's one of the things I really respect about him. He has a company called the Leader Lab. It's an executive leadership recruiting firm. He's been a Tony Robbins trainer. He has his own podcast. I was on it. I was lucky enough to be on that. He's a true professional and he's a good friend. Ken Eslick, I want to welcome you to the show today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man. I'm super excited to have you on. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, me too.
All right, man. Well, listen, let's just jump right into it. Can you share some insight from your career and your journey that really, has shaped your approach to where you are today in your leadership and in your professional development?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, but I think one of the things that I learned, really early on and kind of through the school of hard knocks, I guess, is that, it really is all about people. And I misfired a lot when I had my first business and, my first leadership experience. I'll back away from that for a minute. As a boss, my first leadership experience was in the military, and people do what you tell them to do, in the military. They sort of have to. That's why it's called a lawful order. And I think even though I was a pretty good young leader, I think even looking back at it, I had some growing up to do probably at different times. And I think when I got into running my own company and building my own company, and you realize that when it's your own money walking out the door, if you don't do a good job or just that people have a choice of where they come to work every day, and you've got to create an environment that's going to want to make them stick. And so I'm not saying it in a cliche way or just because I'm here today to talk about talent development a little bit, but really, I mean, if you look at any great leader over the course of time, a long period of time, short period of time, maybe you're successful because you had that new hit product or you did that thing, or even if you led by fear or intimidation, but over the long term, what I've discovered is just there's no other way to be successful than to make yourself successful by surrounding yourself with great people. And so I think at the end of the day, when you or I retire, which hopefully we still got some gas in the tank, but
yes, we do.
When we do retire, I don't think we're going to be looking back on 2023 or 2024 and going, oh, gee, I remember that we improved margins by 2% or whatever. I mean, I think what we'll remember is, maybe that new sales rep that you brought onto your team that you mentored that's now a VP somewhere, or it's always the people and it's always the people stories.
I think that's so huge, right? In the successful organizations that I've ran, I agree with you. You're only as good as the people that you have in your system, and empowering them, right? Yeah. Empowering them to make decisions. And also I've seen on the other side where, you've got a CEO or a leader in there who's got his hands in everything and ultimately trying to empower people, but making the decision. So I think empowering people to take some chances.
Yeah.
And listen, as we all know, and you and I are both leaders, what it comes down to is this: you're going to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And you just have to be able to correct them and learn from them. You show me a leader, out there, and I will show you mistakes that they have made, they've learned from, and it actually helped them grow. So I think that's a great point. And empowering your people to be able to do that is a big deal. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think if you look at, really especially the last like decade of leadership, and I would give like Brene Brown credit for this over anybody else, but sort of this embracement of vulnerability, because that wasn't always the case. Even when I started my corporate career, a lot of times, when you made a mistake, it was, don't let them see it, that, we got to kind of cover that. And
Yes.
not that we would do anything, unscrupulous, but, just kind of keeping up appearances. Right. And, oh, I'm the boss. I need to have all the answers. And I think, going back to what you were saying about like kind of making mistakes and owning them, I think almost celebrating them, like our mistakes are a bridge to connect with our people a lot of times if we handle them the right way, right? If it's like, hey man, I screwed up. I got your comp plan wrong. I didn't pay your commissions on time. Why am I going to compensation? I always take care of that. But like whatever it is, there were a few doors we could have walked through and I picked the wrong one, man. Like here's what was on my mind and I need your help. And I think it humanizes everybody. It's relatable. And through that, I mean, there is no respect to me that isn't mutual. You know what I mean? Like there has to be mutual respect. And if you're not giving it to your people by trusting them and empowering them, then you're not really going to get it. You might get them to follow orders again because they need the job.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the good stuff,
Yeah. It'll rise. And that's the biggest thing is use it as, listen, the mistakes are all used as opportunities.
Yep.
Right, when it comes down to that kind of stuff. Okay, great. Listen, we're getting to a crazy time of year, right?
Yeah.
And when you're a professional,
mm-hmm.
and you, especially you're leading the charge or you're in charge, it doesn't matter. You have to have that work-life balance, right? And what are some of the strategies that you found most effective in developing that work-life balance? Because if you have that, especially from a business cultural standpoint, your organization is going to thrive even more. But do you have any insight or some strategies maybe that you've employed to be able to promote that balance?
Totally. And sometimes I talk about this stuff like, this is it. This is how we do it. And we get it right all the time. And, I think for anybody that's like building a company or growing in their career, you're going to be out of balance sometimes. You just are. I mean, and sometimes it's intentional, right? Sometimes it's like, look, we've got a new product kickoff, or we've got this sales goal we're trying to hit, or we're trying to make President's Club. We're trying to earn that trip or whatever it might be. And we're going to run really, really fast for 2 months in a particular direction. And during that 2 months, maybe my physical fitness isn't where I want it to be, or maybe, date night isn't happening or whatever. Now, if that's happening all the time, like if one work event gets replaced by another work event, then you've got a long-term imbalance, and that's a problem. But, aside from when we are intentionally running or leaning in a certain direction in a much more heavier way than other times, I think just being disciplined and scheduled, I mean, it's so huge. Like, and not just disciplined and scheduled with the stuff you're trying to get done at work, but disciplined and scheduled with the stuff you're trying to get done personally, right?
Bingo, man. Yeah. Bingo. It's so true.
Yeah, because if I'm not intentional, and I've been on the wrong side of that. I've been all execution with work. And then if there's anything left for me, I get to have a life, right? And it's like, I guess I'll try to get a workout in, or I guess maybe I'll go out with my friends or my wife or whatever. But it's like, no, it all needs to be in balance. So I'll give you like just short version here, or like highlights is every weekend I set up for the week ahead. And what that looks like is all your recurring tasks are already in there, right? The meetings that you have on Mondays and stuff like that. And then I'm left with, here's all the things I'm trying to get done, both personally and professionally, and where are they going to fit? And it's a little bit like a game of Tetris, right? Like, how am I going to get my 5 workouts in? How am I going to get this and that done? And how am I going to finish every day by 5:30 or 6 if that's what I'm trying to do? And I work on that on the weekend, because that's when I'm at my best. If I wait until Tuesday morning when I'm in the thick of it, I'm just going to pick the thing I want to do, not the thing I should be doing. Right.
Right. You're so reactive versus
Yes.
proactive, right? It's just,
Yes.
it's so true. And I think that's a great point too. And listen, there have been times where I've been more balanced than others. And those times where I'm not balanced, you really do. You feel like you're under the pressure cooker a little bit as well, because, you know, the ones close to you are the ones who get the brunt of it. And I think communication is the key on this stuff. If you are going into a week that's going to be tough, I try to do this. Again, this is don't all the time, but one of the things strategy has worked is sitting down, you know, Sunday evening with my wife or my kids and saying, hey, listen, here's what's coming up around the bend, right? Might be a little stressed out on this deal. So it just gets, and same with your employees too. Let's say, like you said, you got a big project coming up, right? Maybe communicating, hey, this next week we got a big project coming up, might be a little bit more intense around here. And when you set those expectations, it kind of lessens the blow a little bit and gives people more communication. So I think that's
no, you're bringing up something that's so important. If anything, I've become an over communicator because of what you're talking about, because I also feel like, listen, when we don't have, let me just give a quick analogy or test in a way. If you were meeting Laura for dinner at a restaurant, right? And let's say Laura's always on time. I don't know if she is or not, but let's just say she's okay. I figured she was. So let's say you're supposed to meet her for dinner at 7, and she's normally always there, 5-10 minutes early. And so you wanted to be a gentleman and get there before her. You didn't want to leave her at the table. So you got there like quarter till, right? So now you're there at quarter till. And 10 till comes by and she's not there. And 5 till comes by and she's not there. By the time it gets to 7 o'clock and she's not there and she hasn't texted or anything, what are you thinking?
Right. Like, what's going on?
What's going on? Are you thinking it's something positive? Or are you thinking something?
And that's the whole thing. We're so wired, right? As humans to go to the negative all the time. Yes,
exactly.
Right. That's exactly.
The longer it goes, the worse it gets, right? Because then it's like, oh my God, maybe she got in a car accident. Maybe maybe something really, really bad happened. And in the meantime, there's no evidence to support that other than her behavior is simply out of character with what's normal. And so I think in work environments, what happens is, we're not talking about the big company initiative that's going on or the fact that maybe a company is downsizing a few positions, but they're doing it through attrition. They're not actually firing anybody or anything like that, but they're not communicating. So everybody's going, well, I guess I better get a job before my ass gets fired, right? And they just go start looking.
The negative, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because and all someone needed to do was say, hey, listen, we did have a rough third quarter, fourth quarter. We do need to, watch our costs, but everybody's cool. Here's what's going on. We normally, people move or quit for various reasons, about 10% of our workforce per year. And we're just going to kind of let that happen and not fill those spots, but you guys are good. And that's all maybe in that case that needed to be said, but because it's not said, everyone assumes the worst.
Yeah. And listen, I think that hits it on the head there, right? Because ultimately, what advice would you give leaders, and this communication thing is a big one, but are there any other tips that you'd give leaders who are struggling to motivate or engage their teams in times of uncertainty? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it ebbs and flows. There are times where your company's doing really well, and there are other times where they're struggling. So are there any other, feedback items that you'd give in times to motivate your team or keep everybody on the even keel?
Yeah, it's funny. There's this old John F. Kennedy quote that says the best time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. And it always dawns on me because every leader is good or looks good when the numbers are good. Do you know what I mean? And, we both work for other people. And I swear, like when your numbers are good, it's like all of a sudden people are like, that Dave's guy, he's really smart, and it's like when they're down, it's like suddenly you've lost some IQ points somehow or whatever. And I think that good leaders at every level learn how to stop stuff from rolling downhill. You hear that saying all the time. Oh, it just stuff's rolling downhill, whatever. So the boss is getting beat up by his boss or her boss and by corporate and whatever. Yeah. And now it comes all the way down to the field and I'm just going to smack you guys around until you perform. And it's like, it just doesn't work. And so the time to establish credibility for the tough times is actually during the good times. How are you showing up as a leader? What standards are you setting? unfortunately what happens is, I wonder if realtors are feeling this way right now. Real estate, if you had a license, you should have been stealing money a year or two ago, and then it stopped. Now, if you're running a real estate team a year or two ago, and despite it being easier then and better then, let's say you still did all the fundamentals that you needed to do to be a great team. So you had weekly team meetings, skill building sets. Maybe you did role playing. Maybe you blocked and tackled. You did the admin work. You did all that stuff. But a lot of times what happens is when our numbers are good, we're like, well, I'm not going to lean on Johnny right now. I mean, he sold 4 houses this month. Like, I don't need to hold his feet to the fire for this or that. And then when things do get bad, these guys are kind of left out there because we were weak leaders when things were good.
Right.
And so I think the true test of leadership when it shows up is when times are bad.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the looking in the mirror time that like, did I prep my team for these kind of events, right?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it ultimately is. And, obviously, I come from a marketing background. It's the same thing from the marketing standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Things are really good. You got to keep marketing.
Yes.
And when things are really bad, you got to keep marketing.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, you have to stay to the basics. And that draws consistency across the board. It's like when times get tough, first thing people pull is marketing. That's probably not the first thing you should be pulling, because it shows even when times are bad and people are really putting their marketing brand out there and their feel out there. When things come back, they come back even stronger. So I think it really reflects a lot of that as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's the same way with people do it with hiring too. Like we're going to stop hiring. I'm like, the hiring pendulum has never swung more dramatically pro and con, than it hasn't since COVID, where it's like there were literally tech companies hiring people just to keep other tech companies from hiring them. Like, like just
crazy
$200,000 job, sit on the bench and wait. We'll have something for you later. We just didn't want Google to get you, right? Yes. And 6 months later, they couldn't furlough them fast enough, So. And I think those companies are paying the price now for exactly what we're talking about. Is they weren't there's not a consistency in the way that they lead, and I'm talking now about an entire corporation, or in a way even big tech in general, where big tech was, oh man, we're gonna rent out 10 floors of the Chrysler building, and one of them, it's just gonna be to play video games. You can just hang out and play video games. Unlimited paid time off. When COVID hit, it was like, you can work from home for the rest of your life.
That's it.
I mean, this stuff was out on social media everywhere. And now every single one of them is like furloughing people, get back in the office. If you don't show back, I mean, they were making public statements that you will never have to in the course of your, so how would you feel there? Well, if you have a really big job, you make a lot of money and you have a family to support or whatever.
Yeah.
You got to do what you got to do. So you got to come back. But what level of trust do you have for the company that told you could work at home forever? So they way over promised to begin with, and then just threw out everything that they said after, and so to me, it would be like, I'm in this job for as long as I need to be in this job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
We're not aligned.
And I want to touch on that. And I have so many questions, but I really want to touch on that because you have a huge pulse on the job market right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, just because of your career.
Sure.
And it's interesting how COVID really changed things. And then we went into this hiring spree where everyone was getting hired for jobs and there weren't a lot of strong candidates out there. And now, what are you seeing right now? So if I'm a CEO or I'm an executive leader and I'm looking to build a stronger team, what's the barometer out there at this point?
Well,
on the hiring side?
I'm going to go back to one thing and then I'll answer that. But because they're tied together, this goes back to, if you are consistent over time, meaning I'm going to find the best people and hire them and develop them whenever I can. Now, I get that sometimes you got to slow down, right? And sometimes I don't know if I'd ever say you got to stop. Like, to me, stopping from hiring a president's club level sales rep is just an idiotic move in any economy because they're going to more than pay for themselves. So there's certain people to me that you never pass on. I mean, unless you're ready to go chapter 11 or 7, I mean, I just don't understand it, because there's people that can immediately pay for themselves either in their impact in leadership or sales or something directly attainable to them. But these last 3-4 years have just been crazy in that when things started coming back, because it had been subdued for so long, everything came back, right? So everything came back. Every industry came back. It was so the job seekers definitely held the cards, right? They could, negotiate for more things, and they got a little cocky about it. There was a lot of people staying in jobs for 3 months and then leaving for another highest bidder, and those were mistakes too, because sometimes those highest bidders were the very tech companies that I was just talking about that really didn't care about you at all and didn't have much of a culture to support you long term. So you made a short-term payday that was taxed to death, and then you were left with a choppy resume. So those weren't necessarily the best moves either. As it's leveled out, I mean, it's sort of like this big pendulum that's swinging, right? One way, the other way. And then as pendulums go, they start to level out or slow down a little bit. As we're seeing it slow down now, it's very, very cyclical in a way that I've never seen before, where it's super industry driven. So there's still parts of the economy, hospitality, business services, that are doing very, very well, and that the forecast for them is pretty good. There's technology which was doing horribly because, again, they overspent. Then they overcorrected by losing people, but all they really care about, I don't know why I'm beating up on technology so much, but they are really a good example of what we're talking about. All anyone cares about in big tech is getting the share price up, and at some point, saying that when did it become the thing that was going to drive your stock higher? To say we're cutting heads,
right? We're cutting heads, right? I mean, and
now it's like they can't get enough of it. Facebook was down to $90 a share just over a year ago.
Yeah.
And I think they're over 300 now.
Yeah, I think so too.
But they had a missed earnings report. They were wasting money in the metaverse. They had way too many people, all of which was true, by the way. But then they took a machete to the whole organization, butchered it down. I got to tell you, if they were hiring right now, they'd probably be pretty quiet about it. It would almost be a negative headline to say we're going to increase staff by 10%.
Yeah. And pushing and pulling numbers. And you're right. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And there are companies out there too, when you see that, where they may be looking to sell as well, because they're ramping themselves up for the P&L, the overhead to drop, their numbers profitability going up, not necessarily numbers, but they're setting themselves up for a sale too. So that definitely happens.
So what you're seeing more and more now is, again, there are jobs there. There is hiring there. We have still a low unemployment rate, but if you're in a particular industry, you might say like, well, that's not the case for me. Like, that's not my reality, right? I've got 150 resumes out there, like nothing's happening. And I get that. Like, it's really tough in certain industries, and other industries are still doing pretty well. But what I would say, and hopefully job seekers are learning this, leadership, we could assume we wish they would get this too, but start looking at things like a marriage. If you're a job seeker, and, don't just go for the highest dollar. I think money is really important, of course, right? Like, none of us want to work for free. But 10% more in a lousy culture is not worth it. 30% more in a company that might furlough you in 4 months, if that's been their track record, is probably not worth it either, right? I mean, what you want is good, fair, equitable pay that's going to increase over time with good performance in a company that you can grow with, where you're being groomed for more and being led by good people, right? I mean, otherwise you got to do this song and dance like every couple of years whenever the company, the wind blows and they don't like their stock price and they got to lay off the last 5,000 people they hired or whatever.
Totally. And I think that's a big point, especially when you're interviewing. If you're on the other side of this and you're looking for a career change or with a new company, there's got to be a point where you're doing some interviewing too.
Yes.
You have to be asking questions geared around what the vision is. And the one question I would really encourage people who are interviewing for, any type of position is, what do I need to do in the first 90 days, 6 months, and year? And I want you to break that down for me to really reinforce that I'm doing a great job for this company.
Yeah, I love that.
They don't have that laid out, then there's too much gray area. And that goes back to what we started the conversation with, which is communication, right? You think you're doing a great job knocking these numbers out, and they have a different expectation. So I think that's a real big question I would add.
I think it also shows, that's a great tip, Dave, because I think it also shows for the job seeker, I always tell people, when someone says, you have questions for me. So the interviewer goes, hey, here's all about the company, blah, blah, blah. And they're grilling you on your leadership or your sales or whatever. And they're like, what do you have for me? And I always say, make the questions about the team and about them, not about you.
Yeah.
The questions about you is something you can deal with your recruiter or HR or whoever, meaning you never ask someone in your hiring process how many vacation days you get. Don't even talk to them about the comp unless it comes up directly. Like, ask about, and also, and this sounds a little cliche, but winners ask questions about winners and losers ask questions about not losing. And what I mean by that is, so a winner will ask something like, who are the top 3 people in this building? Where did you hire them? What did they do? What are their numbers? Because that's where their sites are. It would be like if you walked on a basketball court and went, okay, who do I got? Who am I covering?
Right.
There's Steph Curry. That's my guy, right?
That's fair.
Now, on the flip side of that, and we get this all the time, people will go, well, what are the standards? And I'll say, what do you mean by the standards? Because that's a fair. Well, what are the, what they're getting to is like, what is the minimum expectation for like keeping my job? And I'm like, bad line of questioning.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a bad line of questioning.
No way, man.
Because I'm guessing the best this person is going to do is that they're going to like find out where the line is and jump just over it and never thrill you, or they're going to be under it. And so I just think people with a history of performance, they study performers. That's what they do.
And I think this leads to my next question, right? I mean, you've done Tony Robbins training. I mean, you're well steeped in professional growth, personal growth. And I am too. I mean, we're so aligned on that stuff. I could talk about it for hours. But what advice do you have? Let's speak to a younger professional right now, okay, who's just starting in the leadership journey, okay. And I always say this: listen, a leader is not somebody who stands up in front of the room and talks. Okay, right. There's so many ways to be a leader without doing that. But what qualities should they be focused on developing as they progress through their careers, for someone who's, maybe a little bit earlier in their career and they have this leadership aspiration? What are some of the things they should be doing?
Well, I think, you talked about one of the first ones, just becoming a great, like, active listener and a great communicator, right? Learning like what's going on around you. I always like to figure out, when I was younger, still do, but how do things work, within my environment, within my company? And what is my place in that? And I know that sounds like super basic, but most people do not know that. Most people cannot articulate that to you. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're you said young leader kind of coming up. Maybe you're in your first leadership assignment. So let's say you're 25, 30 years old. You are a sales rep now. You're a sales manager, right? And you've got a team of reps. So one of the first things, again, is all that communication. I think the other thing is, let's say you're working for a publicly traded company. Well, take the time to investigate that company the same way you would your fantasy football team, right? Like, most people don't. So what are their revenues? What are their sales? How are things looking overall? Are we beating our numbers as a corporation? Are we growing? Have we grown our headcount over the last? All of these things that I'm mentioning can just be found for free on like CNBC online. It's very simple if you know where to go and get it. And so by understanding that, then it's like, okay, the company is growing and let's say the company is profitable, and that's great. And I really like it. And I fit the culture here, and start talking to people more above you that understand that you have a grip on like what's going on with the company. So mentorship becomes a lot easier. And then pretty soon you're able to understand it. Okay, within this company, I'm part of a group, and within that group, I run the sales team, and the sales team, we meet our numbers by exceeding our customers' expectations in this particular area. And now I'm able, instead of just, regurgitating some corporate crap that they wanted me to say to my sales team, it actually has some meaning because I understand what the big picture is, where I am in it, and then better yet, like where my team stands in that and how they stand to get ahead. And so,
and how can I impact it, right? I mean, how can I impact it in areas that need help versus other areas that we're really strong in? And I think you make a huge point there, right? You're doing the extra stuff. Okay. I always say, if you want to be a leader and you're young in your career, do more than you're asked for.
Yeah.
Just that alone in this day and age puts you a cut above 75% of people out there. Totally. I think it's a huge point.
I had a boss. It was funny. I was trying to get one of my guys a raise or something that wasn't in the leadership role yet, but we were like grooming him for leadership. And I said, and it was time for like annual reviews. And I was like, we ought to get him kind of halfway there right now because he was like doing a great job. And then as soon as the spot opens up, and he said, we don't pay in advance for anticipated performance. And I went, okay, like good point. And that's always stuck with me, obviously, because that was probably 20 years ago. But so then I was like, well, that's my fault because my boss isn't seeing him as a leader yet. Right. So I need to now put this guy in those, he needs to take more action, like you're saying, but I also need to afford him the environment to allow him to take the action. Right. So let him start stepping up at sales meetings, let him sit in my chair in my absence or whatever. Right. But I always loved that quote. And it always stuck with me that if you're with the right, company, the right team, the right leader, so many people are guarded in what they will give. And maybe they should be, because again, maybe you're working for one of those tech companies that chewed you up and spit you out before, and now you're back in the door. And so don't get me wrong, but let's assume you're with the right company. If you're with the right company, you shouldn't be asking every time you step outside your job description for compensation for it. Now, you should be recognized for that effort, and you should eventually be compensated for that effort, hopefully in the not too distant future, but you shouldn't even have to ask. I mean, it should be like, Dave understands that as an individual contributor salesperson, that he's been groomed in a way that says, hey, if I start showing leadership traits, I'm in this growing company that cares about me, I'm on their radar. I bet if I start, assimilating some of those qualities of a sales leader, I'm probably going to be in that position before long. I don't need to worry about, oh, gee, I worked an extra hour putting together the team meeting, and so.
Right. And everyone's got to hear about it. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I know. I always say, make yourself more valuable because the comp will come.
Yes.
Somebody, whether you're an executive, even, top executives, it's the same principle.
And if it doesn't come, then you're just with the wrong company. It's almost like if you're in a marriage and all you're trying to do all the time is fill the other person's needs, that's probably a really good marriage to be in.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't reciprocated, then you should probably leave.
It's a great.
Yeah.
Like if you're in there. Okay, everybody rewind that. Okay. Just that was pretty strong. Great way to look at it for sure. All right, listen, one last question.
Sure.
Okay. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it. It's so great. And we probably could go on for another 2 hours on stuff that we've, learned and talked about. But I really respect the fact that you're doing your part. You have the Leaders Lab podcast and you give back, man. And you had me on as a guest. I loved it. We had a great time. But what's been the most valuable lesson for you that you've learned from your guest? I mean, is there anything that kind of sticks out?
Boy, if anything stuck out. So when I started the podcast, I did it to accompany the talent brand, right? So it was like we have the Leaders Lab, which is talent acquisition, almost all leadership, recruiting. And then it was like, I love leadership. I love talking to people. I love stuff like this. So, and it's easy for me. And so let's just do a podcast and we will support the brand, right? So that's really what it was for. I mean, I'd like to say it was a more noble cause than that, but it was, we'll have a podcast. It'll be named by the same name. It'll kind of edify, the recruiting business.
Yeah.
But then I got into it, and the quality of guests and the amount of people that you get to talk to, it's just been amazing. And so I'm learning from them all the time. I mean, to break it down into one thing, it's hard for me to tell you, other than I've learned that you shouldn't wait. Like if you want to do something, I probably had starting a podcast in my sights 10 years ago, but I didn't want to do it because, I wasn't gonna be great at it out of the gates or whatever. Just like none of us are ever gonna be great at anything our first few attempts. And, I found that the common thread that I saw more often from so many guests on our show were, I wouldn't say a lack of fear. There was some measured fear in there, but it was, they were okay with looking bad sometimes, right? They were just like, well, I'm taking a swing. I'm writing the book. I'm doing the show. I'm start a podcast or, I've talked to a bunch of people that have switched careers and then been really, really, top 1%er in multiple fields, which is crazy as well.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I can relate to that, I was in the same boat with the podcast.
Yeah.
It's going to get started and then things got in the way, and it's like time went on. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I said I was going to do this and I didn't do it. And it was part of being busy, but it was also a part of knowing that, listen, this is going to take some time to get my chops, right? But you got to go through that. You got to go through those progressions. And I think that's one of the things I learned that from, Ed Millett. He has to master something, you have to go through these 3 phases. And the first phase is the awkward phase of doing something, right? It's really awkward. You got a lot of bumps. And then the next phase is the mechanical phase and it's the most important phase. You're getting some momentum and you're kind of doing some things and things are moving the right way, but you got to get in the reps. I mean, this is the point where you've got to get the reps in, and for all the failures, you've got to keep pushing through. And then the last stage is the pro stage, where you ultimately, someone says, hey, that guy's a pro at that, or that gal's a pro at that.
Right.
They didn't get there. They just didn't wake up and they were a pro. I mean, they've worked at it. It's like being in professional baseball. I mean, how many times in batting practice do you have to go in and swing and swing and swing? So
totally,
that's great stuff, man. That's great stuff. Well, listen, this has been a true pleasure having you on today, man. We're going to have you back on again down the road, because I think we could go into some other directions. But I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today and being here with me to
David,
our listeners.
No, it's an honor. And I'm glad you launched it. I think you're going to bring a lot of value and content out there. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent, man. So Ken, if someone wants to check you out, where can they go?
Best place is LinkedIn. I kind of live there because of the nature of our business. I think I'm the only, or one of the only Ken Eslicks out there. Certainly if you type in Ken Eslick and the Leaders Lab, you'll find me there. And I always answer all my own messages there. So.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Great having you again. Hey, check us out on salesproformance.com as well. And thanks everybody for listening to this podcast. Hopefully it's been some good stuff in there for you, and just keep moving to go pro. Appreciate it.